Hello, everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the official launch of Strata. As you know, this is a hybrid event. Many people have joined us in person here, but we also have many of the attendees and speakers online. Talking a little bit about Strata. So I'm happy to share that today we finally coming out. And this is a result of a strong collaboration between FAO and UNEP. Strata is designed to integrate climate, environmental, and conflict and socioeconomic data to help identify and track where these different types of risks are converging. This launch will be an opportunity to explore the capabilities, engage with experts representing different communities of practice, and discuss how Strata can support data-driven decision-making and programming. Many of you have joined sessions or trainings before, and we are delighted to have you back for the formal launch, with new features to be presented and a focus on applications and use case. We have a dynamic agenda ahead. We will begin with opening remarks from Piedad Martin, our Deputy Director of the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment here at FAO, followed by Sally Hadwen, the Chief Digital Officer of UNEP, who will join us online. Then we will dive into a Strata tour where we will introduce the project's background, team, and platform functionalities. You will see firsthand how Strata works, and we encourage you to explore the platform yourselves. Finally, we will move to a panel discussion where we will hear from leading experts who bring different perspectives on Strata use case. We look forward to a lively discussion, but as there are many of you online and here, we kindly ask you that please mute your microphones when you are not speaking to avoid background noise. If there are some technical issues and you notice that is from your side, please write in the chat. And also ask your questions in the chat. We will be taking note of them and you will have an opportunity to discuss some of them at the end of the session. Without further ado, I would like to then call Piedad for start, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone that is here and connected. I'm very glad to be here opening this launch. And I just wanted to maybe share some of key insights, introductory remarks, while being mindful that you're going to have more presentations and comments from the experts that have developed the tool and also other colleagues that are, will share their insights on this specific work. First of all, I would like to highlight that this exercise is the fruit of a collaboration, no? And we are always very open and willing to collaborate with other UN agencies. And sometimes this has challenges, sometimes it also offers a lot of opportunities. So we were very glad to, and we appreciate that UNEP came to us to start this collaboration and that they refer us for the realization of the Strata portal. No? So I think it was a very good combination of using a very solid methodology developed by UNEP, which is the agency expert matter on this topic of environment, with the capacities of FAO on Earth map and geospatial tools. So first of all, I wanted to highlight this collaboration. The second thing is the confluence. I think that today there are a lot of approaches, reports, speeches that talk about the polycrisis and the multidimensionality of the crisis. probably in the Office of Climate Change, Environment and Biodiversity that I have the honor to be the deputy director, we are more focused on the environmental dimension of the crisis, but it's true that all this multidimensionality is very important. And the confluence of environment, climate, but also socioeconomic data and conflicts is very important to understand really the vulnerability, the impact, the risk. So I also would like to highlight the potential of this tool by showing visually what does it mean, this confluence, that usually we analyze in silos. The second issue that I wanted to highlight is the drivers. No? We are trying to visualize drivers, the ones that I mentioned, biodiversity loss, environmental degradation, climate drivers, but to show how they are exacerbating instability, social, economic instability, resource scarcity, displacements, conflicts over resources, and other type of conflicts. So I think that this is very important also to highlight that we are working on this confluence of different drivers with the consequences that they have in a specific location. And this brings me to my next point. It's a geospatial tool. No? It's very difficult to maybe some mind that can read like hundreds of pages of reports can absorb the information, but I think that expressing it visually has a lot of benefits. It simplifies the way that we are looking at it, and also it can have some type of a scale of the importance or the severity of the problems, no? How they are intersecting, but also how we can see them concretely in specific territories. Then I also wanted to share two more points that I would like to highlight from the tool. One that I find very important is that it's data-driven. No? So we talk a lot about the evidence-based decisions and to use the data. So again, this tool is based on data. So I think to face the current global challenges and particularly when we face political alternatives to take decisions, we need to base our arguments and our reasoning on data. So I think that this is also something very important on this tool that is offering specific data on the topics that I mentioned, additional to the intersections. And finally is dynamic, which is what I found also very interesting and different from other tools, that we can see on time, we can see the evolution, we can see what has happened in the past, what is happening now, and it's very dynamic. It's all the time moving, no, evolving as a way to express the data as these conflicts are evolving, no, as these trends and drivers are evolving. So I'm very glad that we are launching it today. I don't want to extend myself because I know we have very interesting presentations now, but I also would like to thank everybody that is connected and here for attending the launch. Thank you.
Hello, Sally, are you ready?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for joining this event. I'll try to be equally brief, although I'm not sure I can beat Piedad, but I'm sure also you're here to hear from the experts, not from us. So I'll just give a few remarks as well from the UNEP side. Of course, we're very happy to finally launch Strata after a long development process. I think it took 5 years. And I'm particularly delighted about the partnership with FAO because this is a real manifestation of the Secretary General's UN 2.0 strategy, where we not only put digital transformation and data and analytics to the forefront, but we also operate as one UN. There's no fragmentation, no redundancy, and we all utilize the best capabilities of each other's organizations. So very happy about this, and also very thankful to FAO for hosting this launch event. Of course, Strata started in 2020 when climate security was kind of skyrocketing to the top of the international agenda. And as Piedad said, these intersection areas, especially now with the shifting geopolitical landscape, are becoming more and more important. So we're no longer just asked to report on pure environment-related issues, but also the causes and effects, climate and security, food security, supply chain disruptions, human migration, health, etc., etc. All of these are increasingly becoming intertwined. And as many people are saying, we now live in a world of polycrises. So we can't afford to be looking at each of them in isolation. And Strata, I think, is a very good illustration of that. And it has been used in different settings even before its official launch. So I know, for example, that it was used by the UN country team in Somalia to analyze the climate risk situation as a result of the conflicts there. And we're getting more and more requests and questions about how we can deploy Strata and similar tools to support UN country teams, but also member states and other stakeholders all over the world. And so this is very timely, and it's also something that we're hoping to grow as a partnership with FAO, but also as a partnership with the EU, which we're particularly proud of and thankful for, by which we can exchange data and federate those data sets. And this is one of UNEP's flagship initiatives, is the World Environment Situation Room platform, which is designed to federate data from different sources and enable the creation of these types of complex scenarios and cause and effect relationships. So this is also really important for UNEP's vision going forward. And of course, the global environmental data strategy that UNEP is working on, which aims to achieve harmonization across the different types of environmental data out there. So as we start integrating also solutions and data from biodiversity contexts and pollution contexts, and trying to correlate them to human health and migration and other things. So I think this is a very, very good start, and looking forward to seeing the next phases. And of course, we're very eager to hear from you, the people who are going to use Strata in your day-to-day work, to understand if it meets your needs, what else we need to develop, how we can build it out further. And of course, as it integrates with the World Environment Situation Room, I'm sure the benefits will only grow. So just to conclude, again, my sincere thanks to our partners in FAO, the EU, and definitely, more importantly, the Strata team led by Celia, in UNEP's Ecosystems Division. And thank you very much for hosting me, and I wish you a great event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Piedad, and thank you, Sally, for these opening remarks. We call now Celia. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, and indeed thank you to Piedad and Sally for so brilliantly setting the stage in their opening remarks. It's really great to hear your thoughts on where the Strata platform sits in the broader sort of strategies of our respective organizations. And I certainly came away with lots of food for thought for our panel later on in the event. So let me in turn welcome all participants this afternoon. I have to say it's a very proud moment to be able to launch this platform finally. As many of you know, it's been an adventure or a labor of love for many of us for many years now. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Celia Halley. I work with the UN Environment Program in our Environmental Security Unit, and I manage a partnership program we have with the EU, as has been mentioned, a program on climate change, environment, peace, and security, which has been the umbrella under which Strata has been developed to its current scale over the last 2 years. So I'll provide a few words of background and a very general overview of the platform before handing over to Julio and Yasmin for a more detailed presentation of the methodology and a few of the Strata features. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Nope, sorry, I'm going back to that one. I thought we were still on the intro. Thanks very much. So how did Strata sort of come to be, and what is the rationale behind it? I think Sally laid it out perfectly already in her introductory remarks. But let me just reiterate to say that it was really conceived at a time of growing awareness of the linkages between climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and conflict, which, as Sally said, really went from a sort of an emerging issue to quite a mainstream agenda item in very little time. And consequently, a time when more and more actors across a variety of sectors were making commitments to better address this nexus of issues in their work. And that in turn led to a much greater demand for, integrated analysis of these various issues to support decision-making, prioritization of investments, program design, et cetera, And yet, there was very limited capacity within our respective agencies, and particularly in field locations where this data was most needed, very limited capacity to perform this kind of complex analysis, especially for people who didn't necessarily have a geospatial data background. So providing access to these kinds of analytics to the people who truly need them in ways that non-experts can understand and generate themselves is really the kind of driving idea behind Strata. Next slide. So as has been said already, this is now an adventure of approximately 5 years that breaks down, into 2 essential phases of development. Starting in 2020, the development of the methodology, and then the building of a prototype of Strata, which was focused on a single country context, Somalia, but which did provide proof of concept in terms of the methodology. And then a second phase of development in which we formed the partnership that is represented today with FAO and moved the Strata platform onto EarthMap. And that's really what we've been up to for the last 2 years or so, is developing the full-scale version that we're launching today. Next step. Next slide. So the version of Strata that we are launching today, you'll hear a lot more about this from my colleagues in a minute, but it's now a global version, a version that has global coverage. It's available for all regions and countries in the world, but offers a very detailed level of analysis for those of you who need it. It's a tool that aggregates data for 26 indicators based on existing data sets that all converge into one hotspot map showing where these different types of risks are converging. And then it also offers 2 climate scenarios, or analysis based on 2 climate scenarios to project possible future changes. And then not only is it completely free to users, but it's also fully open source and completely transparent in the way it uses these different data sets and aggregates them. The code is available for all to see. Strata, however, is not a predictive tool, and I think it's very important to say at the very outset that it does not, the aggregation of these layers or the overlaying of these different data sets does not imply a causality chain or cascading impacts between them. It simply shows where these issues are converging. Next slide. So in a nutshell, Strata provides hotspot maps showing where these different risks are converging, more or less in real time. My colleagues will get into detail on that as well. But it also allows users to visualize individual data layers or any combination of them. And it offers easy to read sort of statistics that can be easily shared and downloaded for various purposes. The outputs are meant or designed to be directly usable in assessments, planning and prioritization processes, program design, and then, of course, the development of conflict prevention, peace building strategies, and any other level of strategy setting. So I'll stop here and hand it over to my colleagues, Giulio and Yasmin, who will provide far more detail than I am able on the methodology, the main functionalities of the platform, and a few of its features. So Giulio, over to you.
Thank you, Celia. So Giulio Marchi, geospatial specialist in OCB. And let's start, let's say, from Who are we? Where do we come from? Let's say, at least in the last 10 years, we can reply to the question saying that in the Open Forest Initiative, we have been developing tools with Google, free geospatial tools for land monitoring, reporting to the Rio Conventions, and also support to very large activities for World Bank, GCF, IFA, DBRD, and so on. We have been developing these tools under a memorandum of understanding with Google, starting in 2015, also thanks to the collaboration we already had at that time from 2012 with the Collect Earth tool. And we have also, especially EarthMap, has been applied and customized to several possible purposes, applications, projects, and so on. One of which, as we are saying today, happened with UNEP in the last 2 years. So Strata 2.0, again, powered by Google Earth Engine. In case you don't know, a huge platform from Google, not only collecting so many data available at your fingertips through a browser, but also connecting a cloud computer that the user can use very easily, very rapidly, just with few lines of code. That is the point. Lines of code that not everyone is really keen or able to process. On the left, you see the EarthMap still current platform and interface. On the right, Strata. Let's say the appeal, the initial look of these platforms seems very simple, but with both of them, you can actually drill down data in several manners, in graphical manners, statistical analysis, and so on. Now, UNEP so came up to us asking for a customization of EarthMap according to their methodology, showing this convergence of evidence, so a kind of, let's say, occurrence of multiple factors in areas in order to calculate a sort of multi-criteria dimensional analysis, if you want. And let's say this convergence of evidence dates back to these 2 documents from the GRC and the UN, where actually it was initially started to be developed. The Strata methodology as well has been peer-reviewed in a paper you see there in the top right. Overall, these are climate, environment, and peace security stress indicators that are combined with population exposure and socioeconomic vulnerability in order to prepare, let's say, a final hotspot map. The hotspot map is just what the user immediately sees. Is nicely colored, and you have the green and white, yellow or red, but at the same time, and that is the very first, we would say in Italian, there is not an Italian word, the triage, so a first screening of the areas, but then you can drill down to the different areas in order to see which of the baskets, of the groups of indicators actually weigh more or less in that area, and even more to the individual indicators per area. We are going to see what kind of area we can do in a moment. So this is, for example, the hotspot map. The areas through which you can have data are either the predefined administrative level at different levels polygons, but at the same time, the user can custom draw polygons and analyze that specific polygon. Polygons can be imported with the usual KML or other types of format, but also, and also basins we have in case you want to do some of this analysis by basin. But also you can do a very specific point sampling on one point and have the same analysis performed on the individual points. Now, all this is nicely, let's say, packed in this interface, and it is updated monthly. So it is global, updated monthly, with a very good resolution in terms of geographical terms. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the features. Again, you can display the different, the hotspot map, but also the grouping maps by baskets and also the individual maps by single indicators. You can display them individually. Each of the layers has an information button, the eye, like we have in EarthMap, for example. And through that, you already have a first explanation on what kind of data set it is, but you can also go to the original source of the data in case you really want to know where these guys got the data from. On the right, at the same time, you can derive the statistics, the charts, the exposure risks by areas, by population, by baskets, and so on and so forth. Now, just a few more images to show you what we can do and what not. In this case, for example, Iraq, at different administrative levels, the user can select a location and inspect, as I was saying, at different levels. Background map can be changed as you like among these pretty usual, pretty common Google Maps background maps. And again, once the user has selected the area of interest, he can start to drill down both graphically again or by charts, statistics, and so on. And also we have added these nature-based solutions explorer, meaning that the thing is comparing your area with other areas around, and according to the number of type of stressors in your area compared to the other examples that we have, it gives you a ranking on the most similar areas that already exist with other projects, and you can have information on that specific project, what was done in another country, but for a similar area to your area of interest. I hope you follow me, because I wouldn't have, I guess. Anyway, you can study it on the Strata interface. So this is just an example that Yasmin is going to show rapidly. And it shows the different baskets of the different indicators. Again, you can show the baskets, you can show the hotspot map, you can show the indicators. We have also added the free of charge, the climate projections from NASA, so you can see according to different scenarios how things are going to occur, mostly badly, but maybe in some areas not so much. And you can export, import these files for the areas, for the results in the most common format. So there is nothing proprietary here. We are open in and out. And with that, I will leave the floor to Yasmin. Thank you. And thank you to the 150 people more, 160 that are following from home or from their office.
Stop sharing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go to the practical example or dive a little bit deep on the platform itself. Users can also access. Julia, can you share the link directly to the platform? Maybe if you want to follow on your own computer, you can as well. So this is the, just reduce here. This is the main landing page of the platform. That is a brief explanation, and that is this super nice video tutorial. Thank you for the cons team here at FAO who developed this for us. So you can see step by step how to use the platform as well. So users can sign in through their Google account, through any other email, or if anonymously. And the advantage of having our own email during the access is that whatever you do in the platform, for instance, if you upload your own shape files and if you run some analysis, it can be saved there. So here I will just enter with my email and demonstrate a little bit of the platform. So this is the main scope for those who have seen Earth Map before and know very well this design. In the left side, you have the column where you select the area of interest. Here we can put anything. And as Julio mentioned, there are different categories of boundaries that can be displayed. Regions or even provinces or districts for different countries. The user is able to draw its own boundary as well, or even upload their area of interest into the platform and run the analysis. Here on the left panel, we also have all the indicators together with the components of the Strata assessment or the hotspot map. By default, when you open the platform and select an area of interest, the hotspot map will be displayed automatically. But you can also, for instance, just with the on and off of the toggle here, you can show the layer or show another layer on top. Here are the components that make the hotspot map, which is basically the methodology that Julio mentioned. That is the climate and environment component, that the socioeconomic vulnerability, and that is the population exposure as well. If you want to have more information about how specifically those are calculated, I would recommend in reading the full manual. It's on the website or even here on the help page as well. There is a lot of details that we do not have so much time to explore here, but I would advise everyone to read through this info button. As Julio was mentioned before, everything, and Celia as well highlight the transparency approach of the platform and what that means in practice. So it means that the user is able not only to download the layer that is looking at the page through the share button, but also to go directly into the asset on Google Earth Engine and see the code where that layer was produced. So for non-technical users, that means that you have directly access to the raw data. So you can maybe download for yourself and use in other platforms, or even, I don't know, have a copy of the code and change accordingly to your needs. Everything is shared here through these buttons in the end of the info that you can open this pop-up for each layer. So this is available for everything that's on Strata. And an interest aspect as well, besides these components of the hotspot map, is that it's break down even into more details. And Julio mentioned before, like we can check all individual layers that were used to access or to generate the hotspot map. So here you can find the agricultural stress, degraded land, meteorological drought, the risk of flooding, heat waves, forest loss. So there is a set of climate and environment indicators, as well as population socioeconomic vulnerability and peace and security around the different types of conflicts, or the aggregate conflict layer, which means that all of them are showing at once. So this is, of course, our left side of the platform. And until population socioeconomic vulnerability, we have the components of the hotspot map. But we also have this auxiliary data. And here, just to make clear, it's auxiliary because climate projections and the nature-based solution catalog are not included on the generation of the hotspot map. Because as Celia mentioned, Strata is not a predictive tool, and it would be very complex to add projections once the second layer is not related with projections. So to not mix things, not make a mess, we decide to put those as auxiliary data. Of course, it's still quite interest to the user to take a look and see what are the conditions over the area in the next 30, 50, or 100 years. And also the nature-based solution catalogs, where the users are able to display where these projects are around the world. And if you click on this, you have more information about the project. So all this is very interesting, but I think the main component of Strata is the analysis. Just a quick overview as well about the different base maps that you can change here on the left side, and about the labels that you can also deactivate them. So I prepare a quickly example here on how we could run the analysis. So here I have the hotspot map active and any conflict active as well over this area. And then I would like to see what's happening there. So here I clicked on this process button. I believe this, just to do it again, then you can see how much time it takes as well to have an analysis over this area. If the area is too big, you can face some like long processing or like some error, because there is of course a limitation in terms of how much you can process at the time. So here is going. Okay, oof. And okay, so here what the right side tell us, right? So after deriving the statistics from the layer that is processed, the hotspot map, it breaks down or classify this map into severity of conditions. We try to make it that way because it's much easier for us to understand when you break in different parts the map instead of have a continuous, then you cannot like categorize each color or each values and so on. So in the question mark button, you have a more true explanation about the different classifications that are there. And this is like described in this little graph here that you can also maximize. And it gives you an area per population affected divided between low, moderate, high, or critical. So another interesting is the breakdown by different baskets. So you have the amount of conflicts that and the types that happen over the area, but you also have a percentage of population and area affected as well by the individual indicator list, both for climate environment, socioeconomic vulnerability, and population. And in the last bit of the right side, we have climate projections and the NBS Explorer, as Julio mentioned before as well. So this is just a quick demonstration to show you on the capabilities of the platform. And for those who have seen this before, because we've done some trainings before, this may be not new, but we do have some news. We, with the help of Alfonso and Giuseppe, actually, we decided to embed in the platform an AI assistant that can help us to understand these insights. So this is like a very powerful tool to describe specifically like what the data is, especially for non-technical users, and what is trying to demonstrate for the area of analysis. So it gives the users the access to a very simple report, and it shows what are the most critical indicators that are affecting that area. It's not, we always take care to not predict anything or not suppose causality between the different indicators. But of course, this interpretation sometimes can give some relational. So for instance, if I have a high or extreme food insecurity on a place, and I also have a very strong drought or degradation, it can say that food insecurity may increase because we have more drought and more degradation over the land. So we also have a big disclaimer here, just to be aware. It gives in the end a brief summary and fine insights and some recommendations that, again, we account on the user own knowledge of the local information to interpret this report. So this, I think, is a great addition to the platform. Of course, there are many others doing the same approach, but I think it will be a very interesting thing for the users interested in the platform. So I think I've shown everything, Julio. Okay. And thank you very much. Celia, I think now is your time to moderate the session.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for that brilliant presentation, especially Yasmin of actually seeing it in action. It's always very exciting, even for me, to see how the new features are showing up on the platform. And I can see from the chat that there are many congratulations and also many good questions that are being answered, particularly those questions that are more of a more technical nature will be answered directly in the chat, and we'll have an opportunity to come back to some of the more substantive or philosophical ones after the panel segment, which I have the pleasure of moderating and which we will start now. So if I can ask our brilliant speakers, Julius, Liz, and Halina, to turn their cameras on for this section. The idea here is to move from the presentation of the tool itself, which is obviously very exciting, to an even more exciting discussion, which is how is it going to, or how can it be used? So the speakers that we have on the panel today are all representing sort of different users or potential users of Strata in different contexts and in different roles. And what we're really hoping to do is to illustrate how the outputs of Strata can be used to support a variety of objectives, but also to hear, transparently and openly about some of the challenges in using these types of tools, and hopefully come to discuss as well some of the complementarities between a tool like this, Strata, and others that are out there. So we have three brilliant speakers who will each be given the floor to briefly discuss their roles and the types of data that they need to fulfill them, as well as how a tool like Strata can support them in those roles. And once we've heard from all three, we'll open the floor to questions and comments so that you, the participants in the room at FAO and online, have an opportunity to ask questions directly of the panelists or more generally of the team. And we'll continue to answer the questions in the chat, so please keep them coming in the chat as well while the panel goes on. So let me turn now to our panelists and give the floor to start with to Julius Jackson, who is team leader in the Conflict and Peace Unit with the Office of Emergencies and Resilience at FAO. And for the purposes of this panel, Julius represents the kind of conflict prevention and peace building practitioner tasked with ensuring that development programming is not only conflict sensitive, but also actively contributes to strengthening peace. So Julius, I mean, first of all, you can tell me if that's an apt description of your role, and please do correct it if it's not. But also we look forward to hearing from you as to the types of data that you most need in your role to perform these tasks aptly. So over to you, Julius, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Celia, and good afternoon to everybody here in the room and online. I'm very pleased to be here at the launch of Strata, and we've been involved in discussions with the team over the last few months, so it's really great to see it being launched today. As Celia said, I lead the Conflict and Peace Unit in FAO's Office of Emergencies and Resilience, and she very aptly described the work that we do. We also cover forced displacement as well as conflict-sensitive programming and how we can contribute to local peace through FAO's mandate. And talking about mandate, I think one of the first things I want to mention is the growing challenge between not just climate and conflict, but climate conflict and food insecurity. And from an FAO perspective, conflict and climate change are two of the main drivers of acute food insecurity globally. So the global report on food crises in 2024 highlights that nearly 282 million people across 59 countries and territories experienced acute food insecurity, so IPC phase 3 and above. And that was an increase on the previous year. And the 2025 Global Report on Food Security, which will come out in the next few weeks, is unfortunately going to see the same kind of trend, a year-on-year increase. And that is also going to be a situation where conflict remains the key driver of acute food insecurity, along with climate change. So from that perspective, and working in the Office of Emergencies and Resilience, where our focus countries and focus vulnerable populations are those that are acutely food insecure, understanding those overlaps and seeing where they are is of critical importance in terms of how we inform and identify where program design should take place. And it's equally important to recognize that 70 to 80% of people in protracted crises, in food crises, depend on agriculture for their income, their livelihoods, and their food security. So we see all of this coming together in places which are highly climate and weather dependent. So a tool like Strata obviously speaks very much to how we look at where we program and also how we program, which is what I'll get to in a minute. And as we all know, in terms of climate, peace, and security, those combined impacts of conflict and climate change are changing livelihoods and in ways that are often weakening social bonds. And one way that this is manifested is through increased competition over natural resources. So by enabling practitioners to visualize these overlapping risks, the relations between them, really offers, as was said earlier, these crucial insights into where climate stressors, where food security, conflict dynamics all coexist. And that highlights where we also need to be cognizant that interventions need to be designed in a conflict sensitive and a peace responsive manner. What do I mean by peace responsive? I mean, not just doing no harm, but also identifying where we can do more good. So as well as being conflict sensitive, recognizing that there could be opportunities that we need to design projects that are not just addressing a scarcity of natural resources, but in such a way that they can contribute to social cohesion between diverse livelihood groups or indeed other group identities. So this is an important element because without understanding and identifying where these hotspots are, it can be challenging from an initial scan to see where some of these opportunities exist. And whilst we should be conflict sensitive in all the programming we do, in highly fragile contexts, it is especially important that we do that, particularly where we're facing resource challenges and people-centered approaches like conflict sensitivity may actually be more challenged in terms of funding as we move forward. And how do we contribute to local peace? Well, through a peace positive approach where we can actively integrate conflict sensitive, climate adaptation, food security strategies, we can see how we can try and contribute to localized stability and improved resilience. So take an example of a PBF project, sorry, UN peacebuilding funded project in South Sudan, where we were working in Bor, Pibor, and Malakal with UN Women, with IOM, and a community empowerment for peace organization. We were addressing climate and food security challenges by reducing the impact of climate shocks on conflict dynamics. So that's through local governance mechanisms. And Strata can help us look at some of those overlaps and where some of those hotspots are, so we can see where more scarce resources can be brought to bear in the most critical areas. And given the live dynamic nature of the platform, as was mentioned earlier, there's also an important adaptive programming quality to this. In dynamic contexts where conflict lines can shift quickly, it's important that you incorporate an adaptive programming element into your project implementation. And Strata can help support that, as well as having ongoing context monitoring of a more qualitative nature. A third point, I think it's about informing transboundary, shall we say, approaches, transnational approaches. We all know climate security risks, climate change doesn't stop at borders. And from a livelihoods, agri-food systems, food security perspective, it's really essential that we understand some of these transboundary risks as well. If you think in particular, for example, of transhumance across the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa, East Africa, and elsewhere, where we can understand better some of these movements, some of the impacts of climate change, and bringing maybe additional elements into the platform down the line that can help us visualize these better. That's also going to be hugely important as we move forward, and in terms of working on some of these extremely complex changing patterns of movements which are not only impacted by climate change, and transhumance is shifting from where pasture is available to where it's has been available in the past to where it's now available, which can impact upon more sedentary livelihoods, but also where geopolitical constraints, as well as socioeconomic ones, and indeed the pandemic, where borders were suddenly closed, meant that there were potential hotspots of conflict because of scarce access to pasture. So incorporating those additional elements down the line may be very, very helpful in terms of program identification and program design. An additional element I just flag, I think, is the utility on the visualization, picture speaking 1,000 words part is extremely important when it comes to speaking to policymakers, decision makers, and in terms of resource mobilization. Our DDG, Bechtel, presented to the UN Security Council on climate, peace and security roughly this time last year. And from the feedback we got, one of the most impactful elements of that presentation was a visualization around transhumance and some of the conflict elements overlapping with climate change elements across Sahel and the coastal states, and how that was shifting, and illustrating how climate change in one context can actually be impacting conflict dynamics in a completely different country. So we know from experience that this is hugely important. And I think that additional clarification, simplification to non-experts, to policymakers, is a hugely valuable aspect to this tool, and strengthens and informs our conversations and allows us to build a narrative which is more accessible and ultimately one which is going to be more impactful. Given all of these positives, one caution would be that as well as a data-driven quantitative platform, which has got the power which has been demonstrated by my colleagues, it's really important that given that informational baseline, that we are matching that and complementing that with qualitative contextual analysis. Now, this is obviously more maybe time-consuming, not to denigrate the amount of work that's gone into the development of Strata over the last number of years, but in terms of having area-based contextual analysis, drawing on people-centered dialogues, focus group discussions, regular rounds of surveys, and I just saw briefly that my colleague Neil Marsland, who runs the Data and Emergencies team in the Office of Emergencies and Resilience, is online, and we work with them to incorporate questions around the impact of displacement and conflict on food security. So where we can bring in some of that additionality. And I think those qualitative elements are as important as the quantitative, and they help us round out the picture in particular contexts. And I deliberately said area-based approaches because the design of projects to support resilience, address acute food insecurity varies very, very much by context, and often at quite a granular level. So the granularity of Strata, as well as its global reach, is also a really helpful aspect of the tool. I'll just wind up by saying that I really look forward to taking on board the developments that have happened. I'm curious to see how the AI function summarizes some of the overlays that we can do. And also to come up with some additional suggestions down the line, and maybe additional data sources that could be brought into this. We've had discussions already in recent weeks and months, but really very, very grateful to be here this afternoon at the launch, and look forward to using this. And my colleagues in country offices and regional resilience hubs are doing that and looking at the opportunities that this presents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Julius, for that brilliant intervention. I mean, a number of important points you made, but I think if I can summarize just a few of them, which is your contention that a tool like this can very much support sort of more targeted and effective programming in some of the world's most vulnerable areas. I think you made a very good point about how the resource landscape is obviously dwindling very fast, and a tool like this can help us target the resources that we have towards the most vulnerable areas, or the areas that need it the most. You mentioned as well the importance of using tools like this to monitor these highly dynamic contexts that most conflict-affected regions or areas are. And to use it to adapt programming in consequence or in line with these shifting dynamics on the ground. And you also highlighted very importantly that tools like this can lead to a better understanding of some of the transboundary peace and security dynamics that are linked to climate change as well. And to end, and I will use that as a segue to Liz, because I know this point is very close to her heart, how important it is to compare and contrast and complement the type of analysis that a tool based on quantitative measurements can provide with much more kind of in-depth, granular, local contextual analysis. So I think that's a perfect jumping point to introduce Liz Carabine, who's our second speaker today, and that I'm delighted to welcome. I know, Liz, it's a very busy time in your region, unfortunately, due to tensions on the ground. So thanks for being with us. Liz, as many of you I'm sure know, is the Climate Security Advisor to the Office of the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General to the Horn of Africa. She represents a very important use case for Strata, no pressure, Liz, not only because she represents the UN's sort of political arm, but also because she is precisely a climate security advisor deployed to the Office of the Special Envoy by the UN Climate Security Mechanism to strengthen its capacity to address these issues. So again, Liz, thank you very much for being here. And let me just lead you off with the same questions that I've posed to the whole panel. What type of data and analysis do you need in your specific role? And how does a platform like this support your work? And where are its limitations? Over to you.
Thanks so much, Celia, and good afternoon, everyone there in person and online. A huge crowd I can see, so really a pleasure to join you. And congratulations first to the team on Strata. I followed it for 3 years now, a bit from a distance, but as Celia's saying, it's always impressive to see a demonstration and the improvements. The AI function, definitely a new one to me, so I'm looking forward to getting straight off the call and playing with it. But yeah, as Celia said, I mean, I'll maybe frame what my answers around what I would say broadly are the three functions of my work. And I am one of a cadre of climate security advisors to UN political or peacekeeping missions, around the world, mostly in Africa and Middle East. And we all grapple with very similar questions. So I think to some extent I can reflect the challenges we all face and the roles we all have. So the first one, really, the primary function of us sitting in the missions as kind of technical experts is to do this job of assessing climate-related risks to peace and security. The mandate of my office, where I sit, is one on conflict prevention and peace and security. It's the political office, as Celia said. So, prevention is perhaps even more complex in terms of analysis of, trends and possible responses or preventive action compared to response, which is also something we find ourselves doing as the UN system here in the Horn of Africa on a rolling basis, I think it's fair to say. So assessing those risks in practice, I mean, either turns out to be very broad, these are the broad trends, and Julius has mentioned some of them. We would say for the Horn of Africa, we see, obviously threats to food and water security that can be quite localized in certain border areas or certain communities, certain, ecological systems, and also between countries. So, at various different scales. And I think that is a challenge of working regionally, which is not quite on the ground, but also not quite global. So I can speak a bit to that as well. Or we get very, localized cases, or, through our normal work and analysis, we can see, a particular case of where we think or where we already see certain conflicts exploding or certain humanitarian crises unfolding, and start to be able to delve into that in quite technical detail, not just with ourselves, but with the whole UN system, to try and work out what's going on in terms of the linkages or the risks posed between environmental or climate change factors and the types of conflict, or maybe the precursors to conflict, ideally, that we would see. And some of that is more like, political unrest, even hate speech, the different things that we monitor in an office like ours. So there's a gap in between that, you know, a very localized case study, the kind of example that Julius was giving at the end there, and the very broad trends which don't actually tell us that much upon which we can act in an office which is operating in quite real time in a region like this. Wherever you find a UN mission, there's usually a reason, and it's because it's a complex and you know, sort of protracted crisis kind of context. So the demand, if you like, for this kind of information and what to do about it, what kind of entry points could there be, is on a sort of day-to-day basis or next week. And of course, we all know, those of us who have the climate environment background, that's not how we, you know, operate in terms of analyzing trends and potential impacts, even the past, but also in the future. So these are some of the sort of challenges that all of us advisors posed with on a regular basis. And I think where a tool like this really helps us is we can get mired into the detail. What I've noticed, actually, just playing with Strata again in preparation for this session, is for us, we can look at the map, let's say, of the environmental basket or the conflict basket, and very quickly have the information of what we see. We can assess the accuracy, you know, wherever there can be any issues like that. But we have the story in our heads, and actually it's very helpful then to zoom out, because often what we're asked to do as an office, and not just as an advisor, is, you know, what are the implications of this phenomenon that we're watching in this part of the region for other parts of the region, when we also know those are very dynamic and complex. So joining dots where, you know, there could also be country teams or missions in the countries that are responsible for that level of detailed analysis and sort of decision making. But for us, how do these all join up? And actually being able to zoom out and play and use this tool myself, but also in the sort of group of counterparts that I have in agencies, UN agencies and missions, is really useful and important and worth mentioning. I think another part that I find very useful is the projections. And it sounds a simple thing. You did mention it's not a predictive tool in any sense, but having the climate projections there, where we also have the conflict data, to just very, you know, that's often lacking in some of the tools that I look at. And I find that just very helpful to be able to organize my thoughts, let's say. The second big sort of area of responsibility for an advisor like me in the mission is around the coordination. So that could be the country team, all the different agencies represented in a country from the UN. In our case, it's the regional bureaus usually, and also the resident coordinators' offices, so all the different country teams. And I mean, I'll take the opportunity to say that UNEP and FAO are among our most active and, you know, important sort of partners in this climate security sphere, because what we're always trying to do is combine the technical with the political. So we do really need exactly this kind of technical support and analysis from the specialized agencies to feed through me and be translated into some kind of political narrative, as Julius also said, like building a narrative for the political leaders. So in that sense, I mean, I won't talk too much then about the targeting of actual programs and interventions, because there's many examples of that, and Julius has spoken, and Celia too, very well about how this tool can be used for that, and I'd fully agree. I mean, we're trying to work in what is already a very climate vulnerable and conflict affected region to really target the cross-border areas and the most vulnerable you know, parts of the region where we may not be as a UN system currently working, or prefer to work, or let's say, or difficult to access, and all of the issues we know about programming in these kinds of contexts. So that's one whole area of where we would be working as a UN system. I do think then having a tool that is one that is built by these kinds of partners in the UN already gets us past. I'm watching all the chat comments come in, you know, the technical questions. Of course, there's always many of those, of what kind of data, how, you know, what can it do, what can't it do, where could the sort of limitations be, can already get us quite far if we want to sit down as FAO, IOM, UNEP, and the office to just get on with not only analysing the problem, but what do we do about it, whether that's programming, whether it's advocacy, and increasingly whether it's the kind of mediation and good officers functions of a political mission like ours to try and clear the way or discuss with our member states and regional bodies on how to proceed with a different way of doing things, for example, in humanitarian or development or peace building spheres. So that already is valuable, I would say. It's not an entirely unique tool, but it is a UN's tool. And I'm really especially excited to hear Julius talking about the potential that gives us then to build it out. And I don't say that lightly. I know that what it's taken over 5 years to build a tool like this. But when we would perhaps have access to different kinds of data, or the data behind the conflict data you would use, perhaps in this global level, and start to be at least able to put those data sets together. I can imagine, for example, bringing in the kind of displacement data that the UN system has. We have different kinds of data around crime, transnational crime, all kinds of things that I can already see that if we wanted to focus on a region like this, global scale is challenging. We could do that. It could be done if there was a sort of case to do so. And even if we wouldn't do it as a sort of technical effort, we can sit in the room, as we do quite often, with all of these different things on the screens, different tools and different data sets, and try to, as Julia says, build a narrative. The third part of the role is around engaging with the member states, of course, and in my case, especially with the regional economic community, and African Union to some extent, as well as our counterparts on peace and security in this region. If you know the region, you know that that's a difficult puzzle. There's many conflicts, and the multilateral systems, are designed to work in a certain way, and it's always a challenge. And building the narrative, I'm just picking up on the phrase, because I think we're fortunate in the Horn of Africa that we have a lot of political buy-in on this issue. It's well accepted that there are climate-related risks to peace and security, what they broadly are, that a regional response is required to address them, and even some, real efforts policy-wise and programming-wise in how to do that. So we don't really have so much of a challenge that I can imagine other regions definitely do, where the tool can also help to build the narrative broadly. But in trying to sort of make decisions and decide upon a course of action with our counterparts, which in my case is 8 member states, and IGAD, the regional body, and the African Union, who all have their own sets of tools as well, and sets of guidelines which have challenges around trying to integrate exactly these kinds of data sets on conflict and climate and environmental factors, or other socioeconomic factors, is something where it can be really helpful, as someone has just said, to be able to sit and visualize, these are perhaps what some of the entry points could be. Could we, in some of the conflicts that we would see in the region right now, actually be taking kind of these nature-based solutions, or environmental restoration, or environmental peace building, as we're calling it quite broadly, as a step towards engaging on what are very politically complex issues that is perhaps a less political entry point to take in from the outset. So that's the way that we're working. It's full of gaps and challenges, this kind of role, but we do have a sort of critical mass of advisors here in the Horn of Africa region, and I think it's really incumbent upon us to work with FAO and UNEP and others to really get the full potential from a tool like Strata, which it can be easy to initially, to speak very frankly, think this can't really help me because I need data from the ground, not global data, or I need data now, and that's on the slightly different timeframes and so on. But I must say that just over the last weeks of engaging again, I can see a lot of feedback has been built in, and I think that we can really start to apply Strata to the work that we're doing at the regional level, which is perhaps maybe a bit of a unique case to add to the work already done at some of the country levels, including, as Sally mentioned, in Somalia, which is in my region, of course. So I hope that builds a bit of a picture, Celia. I'll stop there and hand back to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. It definitely does. Thank you very much for sharing these thoughts. It's really wonderful to hear that your sense of how Strata can be useful in your particular role or that of your office has evolved, and that you can see that functionalities have been added that make it a helpful tool in engaging both with the broader kind of constituency of actors in your region, and particularly with member states. I really enjoyed your thoughts about sort of the scale of analysis. It's true that we, continually hear that the more detailed the analysis or the more granular, the more helpful it is. And there's certainly a case to be made for that. But it's great to hear that you also feel that there are benefits from sort of slightly zooming out, as you were saying, and being able to connect the dots between areas and regions that are experiencing, sort of interlinked challenges. So thanks a lot, and thanks as well for, kind of indicating that you're interested in following or in continuing the discussion around potential customizations of Strata. It's true that we won't have much time to get into those options, but that's also an area that we're very much looking forward to developing, is kind of better understanding what specific constituents or specific actors' needs are and how we can customize the platform to best meet those needs. Given the time, however, I will move right along to our final speaker. Thanks again, Liz. I will now hand it over to Halina Uvarova, who recently joined UNEP's Environment and Security team from the Green Climate Fund. So given her background, we were thinking that Galina was in the perfect position, if you will, to share some thoughts on how Strata or tools like it can contribute not only to improving or strengthening the awareness of socio-political and conflict risks within climate finance investments, but also to leveling the playing field in terms of access to critical data and lowering the barriers to finance for conflict-affected and vulnerable states, which many have repeated is an objective throughout the last COP meetings. So Halina, thank you very much for agreeing to sort of bridge your former and current roles for purposes of today's panel. And we very much look forward to hearing what you have, your thoughts on that sort of integration. So over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Celia, and happy to see everyone and so many colleagues and partners joining online. So yeah, I want to complement this excellent discussion with some insights about the importance of multidimensional as well as integrated analysis, some points that were raised here already. And yeah, I hope that my experience from the Green Climate Fund more recently, but also before working at the country level, will be a helpful additional perspective in this discussion. And I'm very glad that Liz actually raised this particular point that I will be diving deeper into about bridging and linking technical insights into decision-making and policy-making, because that's exactly what I think is a very important task for both sides, for technical stuff, but also for decision makers to bridge, to answer the question, how can we share and feed relevant insights in a timely manner, in digestible manner to whoever it needs. And I have a couple of slides to support my thoughts here. So like my general thinking was about role that data plays in equitable access to climate finance. And here, of course, we talk about not just climate finance, but climate finance that's needed in the conflict-affected environment and settings, which often, as we know, happens in the most vulnerable areas. And from here, yeah, so we all know perfectly that climate finance needs to be needs driven, and data is a useful tool to support the sort of need assessment. But the question always comes how we define and measure this sort of need for climate finance in a specific context and how it's reflected in the data. And the data can reflect, again, it's any sort of data set or indicator or a data tool or a platform, however useful it is. It is a model, right? Which models, which represents reality in a particular way from a particular perspective. And that's what's important to understand. So coverage of the data might be different, right? Geographically, or as someone asked in the question, in terms of spatial resolution. Data can be used differently. It can be used as we mentioned here previously to inform it can be used as an entry point, or it can be as justification for particular point of view. Question is always who has access to data. If we're talking about decision makers who might be overwhelmed with the data or like too busy to actually think through, we can say that actually that's also hinders access to the data and to data-driven decision making. Or on the opposite, and I'll be coming to that, we have some countries which for whatever reason, beneficiaries, they don't have certain data, therefore they cannot use it for explaining their situation or needs. And also it depends, of course, who collects the data, because it designs how the certain context is represented. So that's just a quick starter. And then on how we imagine finance flows, and in this case, I'll be talking about climate finance, but yeah, it would relate or be relevant to any sort of international assistance. We have provider, we have beneficiary, and that's how it's captured, let's say, in Paris Agreement or in Green Climate Fund's governing instrument. That's usually what we see. But in reality, of course, we have the flow as it's imagined. And then we have limitations from the reality. And limitations, they exist on both sides of the provider, which is climate finance institution or international finance institution, but as well as beneficiary, which in this case, we'll be talking about countries. And as I worked on both levels, I'll try to provide some examples on how it can look in reality and how data tools and especially Strata, if it would be used in those contexts, could help. So very often limitation provider side would be finance, of course, because it's never limited. So you have to prioritize. To prioritize, you have to understand, apart from your strategy, what happens where. And on the side of beneficiary, which in this case, we're referring to the countries, right? Or more local level. That's often local capacity, which is always often technical. Also from my previous work, we could see issues when the country obviously understands their climate vulnerabilities, exposures, and so on, but because of the lack of the data or lack of technical capacity, or both, it's very difficult for them to articulate it in a way which would fit properly into good proposal, which would actually provide them access to finance. So one side, if we'll talk about provider perspective, we know that everywhere photo is to attract your attention, climate impacts are more severe, more frequent, disasters, and so on. This is happening, of course, some areas are affected more than others, or we see the impacts faster and at a larger scale, but generally it happens across the globe. So when we talk about Green Climate Fund, where I worked before, it says that it gives a specific floor allocation to ensure better access to climate finance for least developed countries, small island developing states, and African states. but still it's a lot of countries. It's yeah, a very big pool for the finance available and for the processing capacities available. The question is, how would a climate finance institution like this prioritize among vulnerable countries? And also, let's say we have a success story of certain countries which managed to ensure project after project, but how do we make sure that the finance actually goes to the most vulnerable communities within this country at subnational level? For this, obviously, we need good platform. We need a good overview of hazards, risk, and everything that would allow us to compare where we are investing. And now GCF is actually starting to look exactly in this way, assessing the gaps, and within the geographical gaps that they have, they think about who should be higher priority, but still having this sort of tool like Strata, which allows multi-criterion assessment and very quickly to provide broad overview of what happens across the countries. It can be a very useful tool to say the climate finance needs are urgent, but that's where things are already happening, especially because the data is updated regularly. Then if we move to the country perspective, actually what we see, so the conclusion for the provider perspective is that good access to the high quality data and global data and high resolution, actually it enables better governance of portfolio and climate finance. But then if we look at the country perspective, actually it also can help countries and beneficiaries to ensure easier and better access to finance. Again, here I'll be quoting something that we've done in the GCF. I was working there in the independent evaluation unit, and we were asking this kind of high-level questions. And what we saw when we looked at the subset of small island developing states is that actually there are countries which lack data on climate vulnerability and historical meteorological data. And this lack of data, which is needed for many climate finance institutions to justify your particular need, it actually hinders this data-driven or evidence-driven identification and justification of country needs and what's to articulate it in a way which is compliant with proposal development. So in the end, it leads to the difficulties in development of the proposals, but also one specific point for the small island development states was that usually all of them had a much higher cost of project comparing to other countries which were not small island developing states. So again, as a kind of both a unit that likes to ask analytical questions and use mixed methods for finding the answers, what we try to do, we try to look closer into it. And it's just a quick snapshot of a map which helped us answer the question why SIDS have higher transaction costs, and it's actually needs driven. I will not go into detail, but you will see the cluster of red circles, which are larger than all the other circles. And then the map generally shows how long it takes to get to the closest city by country, by SIDS. And you see that actually there are regional differences. And for many of the small island developing states, it takes more than 70, more than 100 hours to get to a city. So of course, if you want to develop a project which will be based not near the port or not near the airport, it will take time and a lot of cost to bring materials, people, everything, right? So that was one finding that we could identify using. This is just one indicator. It's open source data. It's OpenStreetMaps. But thinking about if we would have access to such a tool as Strata, where you can straight away look at real-time multi-criterion assessment that could have answered, many more questions or answered the same question in a more complex way. So I think that shows, and that, we had the tool of specialists to do that. So actually, Strata could have been very useful for this case. Yeah, what I wanted to conclude with is to say that for both countries and finance providers, when data on climate and peace is missing or it is inaccessible, then actually needs of countries, they go unseen and unmet, both by climate finance providers, but also by countries in a way because they would not be able to articulate it. And certain things that could help is, of course, the use of Strata. I also shared the QR code, even though we have a link in the chat. But also use of geospatial data. Sometimes it helps to cover certain gaps. Again, Strata is an excellent visualization tool because it helps you to process actually very complex indicators and numbers in a visual way, which actually, it makes it much easier to understand the story.
Mm-hmm.
But also, of course, as we said, the triangulation of evidence using different methods, and of course, using indigenous and traditional knowledge. These are all things that we have to do to understand what exactly happens in the context to make the correct sense of it. I'm also sharing quickly the QR code to the course in integrated analysis for climate, peace, and security, if any of you are interested. And yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Halina, and apologies for pushing you along a little bit. I've not done a very good job at managing the time, and we are unfortunately already at the end of our event. So thank you so very much for sharing those thoughts. It's really fascinating to hear from your previous role, some of the challenges faced by the big donors, by those who need to make resource allocations decisions, and very good to hear that you feel a tool like Strata could really help both target those investments in more effective ways and also meet the needs of some of the member states who have more difficulty accessing that finance. So very good to hear from you, and thank you again so very much to all of you, all of the speakers on the panel today, as well as all of the presenters, and once again to Piedad and Sally for starting us off. I really wish we had more time to continue the discussion. It's always a trade-off between an event that is too long and takes too much time in people's days, and one in which we can get into more interesting, detailed levels of conversation. But there have been many, many questions posed, hopefully most of them answered in the chat. And we certainly hope that this is only the beginning of the conversation. In the next few months, you'll see us reaching out to several of you or several of your constituencies as we, try to better align the tool or the use of the tool to the specific needs of these different groups. So we're very open and interested to discuss some of your ideas around specific customizations of the tool for specific user groups. And then more generally, very open, keen, and willing to receive feedback, hopefully constructive criticism, but your thoughts as well as to, elements that are missing. We are, now at the sort of end of a major development phase, but that doesn't mean that we can't continue to strengthen and improve the tool as we go along. So please do be in touch with us. Several ways of doing so that have been shared already today. I also wanted to note that there's several questions in the chat about the Strata methodology and what it does and does not take into account, or how it weighs the different indicators, etc. There is a published scientific article that details the Strata methodology that is available, among other places, on the unepstrata.org website in the resources section. So for those of you who are particularly interested in the methodology, please don't hesitate to take a look at that and of course write to us or be in touch with any questions that you may have. And I trust the team will continue the discussions that are prompted by the questions in the chat. We certainly remain available to do that, as well as to organize any number of kind of tutorials or trainings for your team specifically. If that's a request from your side, we're always willing to do that bilaterally as well. So for now, I think with about 4 minutes delay, I'm just left with the task of closing this launch event. Huge thanks once again to all of the partners involved, to all of our speakers, to the European Union for supporting this work over the last several years, and for being an excellent partner on this file in general, and wishing you all a good end to your day and a good end to your week. Looking forward to hearing from you again soon. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.